They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
What's up, everybody? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So, I wanted to talk tonight about the San Antonio Spurs because they have been a team that's on my mind a lot over the past couple of days, thinking about the direction this team might go, how good they might be this year, because I'm having a tough time figuring out exactly what this team is going to look like this season. There's part of me that wants to put them near the bottom of the Western Conference just because the conference is so tough. They didn't really make any moves to get better this offseason, but we know the Spurs. We know that they're usually pretty solid every year. Obviously, they missed the playoffs last season for the first time in like 22 years, I believe, which is ridiculous. You know, they've been so good for so long, and we're just not used to seeing the Spurs in a rebuilding situation. I have not seen them in that situation my entire life. Like I said, last year they missed the playoffs for the first time that I have ever seen. In my entire lifetime, the Spurs have never missed the playoffs until last year. And they finally, weren't as good last season. And so I just am not sure what to make of this team for this year. And I'm, it's just weird because all of the fans, and myself included, right, and like NBA Twitter is always ready to blow teams up because we're like, okay, this team is not going anywhere. They need to tank, draft, get some high draft picks, and that's how they're going to get back into contention, right? And like that's usually a pretty good idea, and I think that that's the route that the Spurs should go. If it was me, that's usually what I would do. But I just have a hard time figuring out whether or not that's actually the direction that this team is going to take, just because we haven't really seen them in this situation for such a long time. We know that Gregg Popovich is getting up there in age. Maybe he is only going to be coaching for a couple more seasons, and as a legendary coach, he probably doesn't want to enter a rebuild, for the last 3 or 4 years of his career. And we know that ownership has been committed to winning for such a long time, and so maybe they want to take a different route of building through free agency or through trades rather than going through the draft type of way. But this is an interesting team, right? Because they have a lot of young talent here. I was watching their preseason game versus the Rockets tonight, and they mentioned on the broadcast that the Spurs have 9 players that are 25 years or younger, which I thought was interesting, and I just checked, and that's true. They have, not all of them are like, guys with crazy potential, but you have Dejounte Murray, Jakob Poeltl, Trey Lyles, Devin Vassell, Lonnie Walker, Luka Samanic, Keldon Johnson, Drew Eubanks, Trey Jones, and then also Derek White, who's 26. So that's a lot of, that's a pretty good young core when you're looking at it. Specifically for me, I like Jakob Poeltl. He's a Utah guy. That's my school, so I'm cheering for Jakob here. Devin Vassell, I think, has been very impressive so far this preseason. I've watched a little bit of him. I really liked him in the draft, and he looks like he's going to be pretty good right away. Despite being 20 years old, he looks like he's got an NBA-ready game. He's been able to score a lot. His shot looks good, and he is a good defender. And this is a perfect situation for him, being under Gregg Popovich, and in this system, I think Vassell will probably develop very nicely here, and I like that pickup a lot. I liked getting Trey Jones in the second round. He hasn't played that much here in the preseason, but he is another guy who I feel like can be a rock-solid player here for the Spurs. Obviously, we know about Dejounte Murray. I believe he had an injury a couple of years ago. Hopefully, he'll be able to come back strong from that, even after signing, that big free agent deal. Now that he's getting paid that money, the expectations for him are kind of going up a little bit. Hopefully, he can develop for them. And you got a couple other guys here, right? Maybe Keldon Johnson, something, Lonnie Walker. Who knows? Those guys are more question marks, but they could always end up popping and turning into, real good NBA players. And then the meat of this roster, the biggest question for them right now is what are they going to do with DeRozan and Aldridge? And then beyond that, even guys like Rudy Gay and Patty Mills, because all 4 of those players are on expiring contracts this year. None of them are signed past this season, so we could see a ton of roster turnover for the Spurs next year. So do they kind of want to get out ahead of that and maybe shop some of these guys around, see what you can get back? Because, we've been talking about this for a long time. We heard a couple of rumors around the time of the draft that they were looking to trade any of these guys. Nothing really ended up happening. We were talking about this last trade deadline. We talked about it in the offseason, and then at the draft this year, and up until now, nothing's really happened. We haven't heard a ton of rumors lately about what they're thinking with their players here. And maybe maybe, we'll take that all the way up until the trade deadline this year. And if they don't trade him, then what does this team look like next year? Because it'll be interesting to see, how much DeRozan is going to want to get paid. He's going to be 32, I believe, going into free agency next year. And he's still a productive player. He's still a good player. Probably not quite a max contract level guy anymore. So do the Spurs want to bring him back? And if not, then maybe it makes more sense to kind of trade him to get out ahead of that. And similar thing with LaMarcus Aldridge. He's even older, 35 going on 36, and he just hasn't been as productive as he normally has been. The past year or so, he's kind of been slowly dropping off. We'll have to see how he looks this year, leading up to the trade deadline. But, potentially there's a move out there for LaMarcus, even though that contract is pretty big for a guy who, like I said, is older and not that good anymore. But maybe there's a move out there. And if not, are they going to bring him back next offseason? I don't really think that they will. I don't know. The other ones that are a little bit easier to move, Rudy Gay and Patty Mills, both a little bit smaller contracts there. Gay he's a little older now, 34. It's a $14 million contract. That's not horrible. You could figure out a way to move that, potentially taking back maybe some longer term money and getting a draft pick out of it, or a couple smaller contracts. Similar deal with Patty Mills. I think he could actually help a team. I think he's still a good guy. He can be a spark plug, 6-man scorer off the bench. He can shoot it a little bit, good passer. So I feel like Patty Mills could fit in on a contender if they wanted to trade him somewhere. I anticipate that there would be a pretty strong market for Patty Mills around the deadline, if the Spurs do make him available in talks. So I really think, just for me, I do feel like the Spurs should really consider, making some big changes here. And it's not necessarily a blow up, because really the core of this team is their younger guys at this point. Yes, DeRozan and Aldridge are the guys who have been all-stars in recent years, but I just don't feel like either of them are really central to the Spurs' plans moving forward, so I would not be surprised to see there be trade rumors out there. But like I said, it's really just kind of hard to gauge what this Spurs front office is like, just because this is a very unique scenario for them. We haven't really seen them in this situation before. So we'll just have to see how they want to handle this right now and moving forward, and what that tells us about the guys that are running the show in San Antonio, because we'll just have to see if they're willing to commit to a rebuild like a lot of other teams have done in recent years, or do they want to go a different route. And yeah, that's just it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out there. And then the other thing I do want to mention tonight is I've been thinking about it more, and I know I didn't place them super high in that video I did about a week ago, ranking James Harden trade destinations, but I do think the Spurs, after thinking about it more, I do think they're actually a pretty sneaky Harden trade destination, and that is because they have the contracts to match. You could send back DeRozan or Aldridge, and maybe the Rockets would want to take back one of those players, because that's a little bit better more of a win now player. They can still remain somewhat competitive this year with either one of them to pair with Boogie Cousins, John Wall, and Christian Wood, and the rest of that roster. So maybe that's something that you can interest Houston in. And then even more important than that, they have a lot of these young players, like I mentioned. Some of these guys might have some value. You could throw in either of the rookies, Vassell or Trey Jones, or like Derek White, or even Dejounte Murray, who probably has the most potential out of the bunch. You got a couple of these other guys. Yeah, none of them are like turning heads. None of them are like a huge crown jewel in a package, like somebody like Ben Simmons would be. But these are decent young players, and you could throw them in a deal, as well as the fact that the Spurs have all of their picks moving forward. I don't believe they owe any picks to anyone at this point. They have pretty much every single asset available to them to give up in a trade. So if they really wanted to, they could offer as many draft picks as pretty much any other team. They could just throw in a bunch of future first if they did want to make a trade for James Harden. And I'm not saying that's the right move for them, because like the roster around him wouldn't be amazing, especially if you're giving up one of DeRozan or Aldridge and then a couple of those young guys. It would basically be just James Harden and then a bunch of dudes. But, that's kind of something to think about if they do want to remain competitive for the last couple of years of Gregg Popovich's career, and then maybe, trade for him now, and then next offseason you can really revamp this team around James Harden. Because if you do trade some of those guys, it looks like they're going to have quite a bit of cap space. Even if they do bring in Harden, maybe if they give up Dejounte Murray in that deal, there's really nobody on the books, so maybe you could bring in somebody else, and you're kind of talking about a pretty good team there if you get James Harden, maybe another max next free agent, and then you can kind of build a roster around a couple of those guys. So I do sort of like the Spurs as a sneaky James Harden trade destination. We'll have to see if anything develops over the next couple of days, because it's looking like the clock is kind of ticking here. It looks like Harden might get dealt pretty quickly, and if he does, before this is uploaded, I'm recording this on Thursday evening, the 17th, uploaded 18th in the afternoon, so maybe he's traded by the time you're seeing this. But James Harden, I kind of like the Spurs here as maybe a sneaky James Harden trade spot. Anyway, that's about all I got for you tonight on the San Antonio Spurs and what their future might look like. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Spurs, what direction they might go, any thoughts on what direction they might take the future of this franchise, because I just really don't know which way they're gonna turn at this point. It's gonna be kind of interesting to see how this all shakes out over the next couple of years. But anyway, that's about all I have for you, and I will see you guys in the next one.